That wouldn't be bad.
You're just saying, you know,
But the one go to me that.
Okay.
Are you one of those, like, it's colored folder people?
All right, Madam Chair.
Okay, I think we need to call this meeting to order now. So welcome everybody. I'm glad we got the quorum here. And we can get started and get through this. So begin with, we're gonna welcome our new commissioner. Who is, oh, right down there. Okay. How do you, Halib? Halib? Okay, so welcome. We're glad you can be part of our group here. I hope you are able to accomplish a lot. Would you like to tell everybody a little about yourself?
No, I live Sam, Schenectady County legislature. I'm happy to be here as well. So, I'm also SQ, Electric Services for Government. And I've been the resident of the area for about 22 years. So glad to be here.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think we should go around and introduce ourselves?
Yes, we probably should go around. We can go around and introduce ourselves. I'll start. I'm Jacqueline Stallone. I'm from Rensselaer County.
Marcus Stiglio, we met, we had coffee.
Larry Schillinger, Albany County.
Only German, most work out, the other side, where public ones are doing
Charlie Davidson, Schenectady County. Gary Hughes, Schenectady County Legislature.
Anyone starts CDRPC, President's open Robin Farm.
Gabriel Yancey, Northwest.
And online, we have Judy.
Judy Bressler, I'm from Rensselaer County.
Thank you.
Jim Shaughnessy, I'm from Rensselaer County.
And Opal.
Opal Hines, Saratoga County.
All right. Now you put a face to all the names.
We don't expect you to remember us all in the first meeting. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have the minutes of the January 15th meeting. So everybody got a chance to look those over, and anybody want to make an amendment? You're making a motion? Second? Okay.
Sure.
Oh, okay, we'll give you a second.
Thank you, so. Just.
Right.
And
Thank you.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next, we have the pre-audit financials.
For 2024, revenues were at 99% and expenses were at 98%. Accuracy of that is primarily due to our late year budget amendment. We're anticipating, and this is an estimate, about a $32,000 contribution to the fund balance. That number will be reduced by our obligations to the New York State Retirement Fund, and that's a calculation that's made by an actuary as in a component of our annual audit. On the profit and loss statement on the revenue side, just some anomalies I'll point out is $5,000 on the miscellaneous revenue side. That's our reimbursement from the paid family leave fund. You'll notice that the DOS grant I underprojected, even though we did amend the budget. We wound up spending more money than I had budgeted on that DOS broadband on the revenue side, but we also spent more on that project, which is why we overperformed on the expense side for consultant services. Any other questions on the financials? 2024 pre-audit financials.
Like to make a motion to approve.
So move. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. This motion passed. So next we go to the financials again. Mark
Mhm.
can take over on this.
Yes, I'll note that the second to last paragraph, the year is incorrect. Should be March 31st, 2025. So revenues are tracking at 22% to budget, expenses are also at 22%. Through the first quarter, it's 25% is what par is. We had $316,000 of available cash in the bank, outstanding receivables of about $470,000. We have started to get paid for some of our consultant services that we have been seeking reimbursement from the Department of State for more than 18 months, so that's good news. We have, and the profit and loss statement does include first quarter state agency billings for most of the agencies, and we're going to work to finalize those bills over the next week or so, and then send those out to the agencies. So through quarter one, we are in the black by about $27,000.
Mark, the delay in the Department of State, payments, they come with interest, right?
It's so they're not supposed to come with interest, but our first payment we did receive from them came with interest. So now we have to
Sorry.
now we have
So
to
the board knows that it's.
no, we have to give the interest back. Local
Oh.
local governments like ours are not allowed to accept interest. So we have to now go through a whole process to give them back $500 in interest payments.
Mark, on the income side of things, on the counties, I'm curious, like, the county already have this, and the 25, is it so quarterly?
Yeah, the ones that are 25 are billed quarterly, the other ones are billed twice a year.
Any other questions? You have an motion to approve that?
I motion.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Next, Mark maybe wants to explain a little bit more about this,
Sure.
the bank situation here.
So in 2022, we voted to change banks from KeyBank to SEFCU, which is now Broadview. Broadview being a credit union cannot collateralize funds. Only banks can do that. So anything over the $250,000 FDIC threshold, we want to collateralize. So the board again voted in 2023 to open an account with Pioneer Bank so that any funds in excess of 250,000 we could send to Pioneer and they could collateralize it and we'd be protected. It's a little bit inconvenient to have to move money between financial institutions. So, and we have a great banking relationship with Pioneer. They handle funds for our CSO accounts, our CDYCI. The guy comes here to have me sign paperwork to do wires, very customer service oriented. And they can collateralize funds beyond the FDIC threshold. Changing banks will also address a potential compliance issue in that local governments technically cannot bank in New York State with credit unions. They must bank with actual banks. Whether or not CDRPC per banking law is considered a local government, I'm unclear about, but if we want to be doubly safe, moving our funds to Pioneer Bank will ensure compliance regardless of interpretation of banking law. So the resolution here is for your adoption to move our finances from Broadview to Pioneer.
Make a motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, the next thing we have is the federal funding update.
Sure. At the request of, so this came out of our Administrative and Finance Committee meeting, our conversation, because I was talking about various potential impacts of what's going on at the federal level. And the A&F committee suggested that I write a memo to update everyone on what's going on at the federal level. So the inset little pie chart there shows what our revenue sources. So around 45% or so of our funding comes from either direct federal or pass-through federal. So pass-through federal is like money that the state receives from their grant and then they give it to us. So an example of that would be our 604B program. That's federal money from the EPA that goes to the Department of Environmental Conservation that comes to us. So I'll just give you a couple updates. So we have our longstanding Economic Development Administration Partnership Planning Program grant. So we were awarded another 4-year grant or 5-year grant in 2024. The total award for that is $280,000. It's $70,000 of federal funds a year that we have to match with $70,000. There really has been no mention of any changes to EDA stuff. However, there was a directive for any EDA economic development districts that are actively in the middle of doing their comprehensive economic development strategy or CEDS plan, that they need to take certain language out, like words like climate and equity. But if you already have something adopted, you don't have to change anything. Our EPA grant, that's taught. We adopted it, I think last year or 2 years ago. Yeah. Todd's large Environmental Protection Agency Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Basically, if there is language in the statute that created the program, you're allowed to use the language generally. And that's sort of the guidance that we've been carrying forward for our EPA stuff. So that is a contract term from 2023 to 2027, $1 million award. Our 2025 budget is $173,000. And that budget will fluctuate within tens of thousands of dollars throughout the course of the grant period. These funds were paused for about 4 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then they reappeared again, and we have been proceeding cautiously to carry out our obligations under the contract. The Northern Border Regional Commission, while we can get de minimis funds from our work related to the Northern Border Regional Commission. We're considered the local development district, and we provide technical assistance to applicants that are applying for the Northern Border Regional Commission program. We have not heard anything about impacts of the Northern Border Regional Commission, other than right when this rolled out, they had to pause some other federal grant programs because they had to make sure it was in compliance with some of the presidential directives.
There's a current spring round right now and fall round. So we'll be letting know of that. If there's funding, because that's created a lot of confusion.
Federal pass-through. So we have our grant from the New York State Department of Transportation that is for the our work with the Capital Region Transportation Council down the hall, our region's metropolitan planning organization. And that's for our work with the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. We love our acronyms. So our contract term for this is 2022 to 2032. It's a 10-year contract, so relatively stable. The total award over the 10 years is $2.4 million. Our budget in 2025 is about $170,000. We do have to provide a 25% match, and that comes from our county investments. So total annual spend is about $212,000. One of the things that we discussed with the Transportation Council that could impact funding is a requirement, or an alluded to requirement, that federal transportation dollars should be allocated to areas that have high merit, more than the national average in marriage rates and birth rates. Now, funding allocation of this federal transportation funding is just done by population. So if you're a region, it's done by how many people live in the region, and the total federal pot is allocated to your region based on population. If there's some sort of change to that federal funding model, that moves away from the standard allocation based on population to something that considers marriage rates and birth rates, that could certainly impact federal funding for transportation projects in our region and our funding for the planning work that we do for the Transportation Council. We did put together a series of maps which are attached to the memo that show counties that have either above the national birth rate or below the national birth rate. And the same thing with marriage rates. So it's unclear how this is going to impact federal funding allocations in the future for transportation projects. But in general, we're kind of a mixed bag in the region for both marriage rates and birth rates. There's also maps in there that include census tract areas. The next one is our Department of Environmental Conservation Clean Water Act, Section 604B Water Quality Planning Program. So we just executed a new grant term from 2023 to 2027. The total award is about $436,000. Annual budget's around $87,000. So this is written into the Clean Water Act. So a section of the Clean Water Act says you will, federal government, give money to the states so that they can give it to regional organizations to do water quality planning. So the way I read that is if it's in the law, you'd have to change the law in order to stop the money from coming. But obviously it's on our radar. We have not heard anything from the DEC to say that their pass-through grant funds have been impacted by this. But we will remain vigilant to see if there's going to be any impact to that funding. That funding comes from the EPA to the DEC and then to us. The New York State Department of State, this is the next one, the Regional Broadband Deployment Planning. This project is essentially wrapped up and we've spent all the money that I think we're going to spend on the project unless the county needs some help applying for another grant application. So I don't anticipate any clawbacks there that would impact that funding, although there have been discussions about the need to change the BEAD program. I mean, BEAD includes the word equity, so maybe just instead of the BEAD program, it's going to be the bad program. But we'll have to see what that changes means. Other federal programs, this is not, I mean, this provides funding for us, but it's that we don't get the funds from the federal government. We get the funds from the users of our foreign trade zone. As the grantee, we get fees. So at this point, it's about $42,000 a year. As Kate will tell you, there's been tremendous interest in the foreign trade zone because of what it can do to possibly assist with impacts of tariffs. It's not a workaround for a tariff, but there are certain situations where it could be advantageous for a user to explore, either by delaying the payment of a tariff so you can more effectively budget for it. Or if you are an importer, so you import a widget, you modify the widget and use it in a product and export that product to countries, then you can avoid the tariff completely because technically it has not entered the United States marketplace. With the exception of Canada, Mexico, and Chile. Because we have separate trade agreements with them. So anyway, we're working with the capital.
What's going on today? Could that change? That could continue to change then if we have separate agreements with them.
Things could change with separate agreements with different countries. How it impacts foreign trade zones, remains to be seen, but certainly as different agreements are developed. So there was a guidance document, which is attached in your packet here from the National Foreign Trade Zones Association that talks about some of the federal tariffs and some of the changes and still some of the benefits. We just had a call with the Capital Region Chamber and CEG about partnering with them to more effectively promote the foreign trade zone, given the interest. So never waste a crisis, as they say.
Probably a good place to point out that as far as Schenectady is concerned, trade zones are a little hotter again. So appreciate CDRPC for frequency of the Ibernova and one of their other companies one of their suppliers whose name I always forget. Yeah, for placing them in a trade zone, which probably going to be useful for them. Yeah.
And trade zones no longer have to be located at a port or an airport or port of entry. They can be located anywhere.
This one must be located on their,
What's that, sorry?
this one must be located on their facility, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I thought,
They can go in between without technically being.
so we appreciate that. And so does Judy.
Mhm.
Any questions about our positioning related to the federal stuff? No. Stay tuned.
Right.
I just want to thank you for putting all that together, because I think that's really something we can take home and get a little knowledge out of, especially our new member probably appreciates it more than all the rest of us. So, anyway, thank you.
Hey, Mark, does the marriage rate calculation change with the divorce rate?
That's an interesting question.
I mean, I think
Oh,
those two statistics are divorced themselves. The marriage rate could be impacted by divorce rates simply because you'd have less people that are married if they're getting divorced. Although you could have both happening at the same time.
That would count, it's counted by marriage certificates, and then you wouldn't, I mean,
I don't honestly know how the percentage rate is calculated.
sorry.
That's okay. But I just know that there's a national average and we did the analysis, either we're above it or below it.
So it's all the counts are all done at the national level.
National averages.
That's good, yeah.
Because it could be people who divorce and remarry on a regular basis could actually bump the marriage rate.
It's a snapshot in time. So their previous service and other marriages is not going to be counted twice.
Okay,
That data is taken from the 5 years from the US census.
that makes sense.
It's a subset of the population.
That makes sense, right?
Thanks, Maddie.
Well, the count's so finite, and after a while, it gets to be problematic. So anyway, thanks again for that. Now we have a regional reuse center project.
Yep. So this is part of our ongoing technical assistance program. This project was, I thought, pretty interesting. So while we do these kind of small projects, all the time, this is one I wanted to bring to your attention. So Lauren Ortel, our leader in the technical assistance program, worked with Madison Harisco, our GS and data maven, to work on this project. And they're going to, I guess, talk to you a little bit about the work that went into it and some of the conclusions that came out of it.
We were happy to provide technical assistance to.
I'm sorry, I forgot to share my screen.
We provided technical assistance to the of Zero Waste Foundation, which is a nonprofit that works region-wide to take usable goods out of the waste stream. And they're working towards this concept called circular economy, where it's not a single line of waste from manufacturing to use to landfill, but it goes around and gets reused again. Of course, this is the technical assistance program is in partnership with the Transportation Council. So yeah, my name is Lauren. I'm the environmental planner here and presenting with Maddie, our GIS analyst. But this project was helped throughout our group, especially our intern Erin over here. She helped a lot with the data collection. You can go to the next slide, Mark. Thank you. So the Capital District Reuse is an initiative that, like I said, tries to get used goods back into the market. And they're trying to do this by developing a facility that resells them, such as construction material, furniture, clothing, books, and more, while offering services and job training for repair and deconstruction services. And our role as technical assistance provider was to give them a baseline understanding of the existing market and reuse in the region and how our landfills are composed, what we are throwing away the most of, and then also identifying hubs of the greatest impact for reducing carbon emissions from that waste. Our end products were the interactive story map, which is public access and on our website. and then a memo with appendices that was directly for the group to do next steps, recommended next steps. A big part of it was original data collection, taking data from landfills across the region and putting it into a way that we can comprehend where is our waste coming to and from and how much of it do we have. So we pulled the most relevant, for this exact graphic, we pulled the most relevant categories of waste, such as construction and demolition, industrial and municipal solid waste. And municipal solid waste is like our house waste, like what we put on the curb, but it's also what comes out of schools, what comes out of office buildings when they do renovations. So we see construction demolition as the second highest category here, and a lot of that material can easily be reused for a more affordable price than if it were new. We also did a full sweep of current initiatives, and something we kept going back to was the New York State Solid Waste Management Plan, which was adopted in 2023, that continuously, or in several instances, referenced circular economy, deconstruction, and reuse centers as possible and recommended initiatives for our local organizations, municipalities to adopt. And with that, we saw our climate smart communities, 5 in our region, are already doing actions towards advancing waste reduction. So we see that as an opportunity to continue developing credit, possibly by partnership with a reuse center, to get more credit for that initiative. And then locally, this group is compared a lot to Habitat Reuse, since they do construction and furniture resale. But what sets them apart from any other organization is their combination of anything that could be reused, construction or house goods or clothing, with the support of services like repair and job training. Just 4 of the key opportunities we found for the group, but also for our region overall, is the importance of visibility and accessibility for the reuse center, locating it in an urbanized area off of a highway that can have regional access, and also the idea of clustering these markets. So pairing it with an existing home improvement outlet center or recognizable reuse center will be beneficial for everyone. There's also purely a lack of deconstruction services. And for those that are a little unfamiliar, deconstruction is, instead of demolishing a building, you take it piece by piece and then resell those materials. There are currently no services in our region doing that. So it'll be on this group to train local workforce development. And they're already talking with BOCES and SEEP Center for creating that opportunity. An overarching theme was partnerships and collaboration, developing public-private, but also municipal partnerships to possibly secure spaces or programming, and working with transfer stations and demolition crews to overcome a lot of those logistical barriers. A common theme that we kept coming across is like this environmental impact is the focus, but actually through our research, we found there's just an untapped economic opportunity here. We would be saving, our region would be saving municipal waste transfer costs and creating jobs through this as well. And it's pretty much like taking something that would otherwise be buried, but putting a dollar sign on it and reselling it over and over again. And to close off my little section here, we were able to take all of our numbers from our data collection and see what the actual impact could be. So the group is looking at possibly a 20,000 square foot center in the region. And if that were to be established, it could divert about 380 tons of material from the waste stream every single year. And that diversion would result in a reduction of about 6.43 metric tons of CO2 just from trucking emissions, like trucking the waste back and forth from landfills and from homes. And it would also save more than 1,500 cubic yards of landfill space. And to put the metric tons of CO2 kind of into perspective, it's equivalent to 16,000 miles driven by any one of our typical passenger cars. So next, Maddie will kind of walk us through a little part of the story map that is public access. and she did a great job putting together.
So relevant to our region, we have a very large landfill. A lot of our region's waste is trucked out to Rochester area. It's called Seneca Meadows. It is up, it remains to be seen whether they will get a new permit to expand their operation out there or what's going to happen. We also have an aging population and they live in houses that are full of stuff. So the question is,
Tell me
you know,
about
what
it.
are we gonna do with the stuff with all of our aging population? So a reuse center, like sort of amplifying what is already happening in the market, is gonna be needed for us to address our waste issues moving forward. Maddie, you want me to open up the story map?
Yes, please. It's the link.
All right, I have to stop sharing and reshare maybe. Where is the browser window?
While you're doing that, maybe I can ask a question. So, I mean, and maybe I missed it or it's gotta come up, but was there any sense of what the demand would be for these deconstructed materials?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we interviewed and looked at pretty much every use facility already in our region, like thrift stores, et cetera. A lot of them are at capacity. So on their websites, you'll see we are not accepting furniture, we're not accepting like all these different categories of items because they can't hold it. So there's more demand to donate than there are people buying right now.
For the construction materials, it's really a chicken and an egg problem though. Because you need a market to be able to make it economical, to be able to pay for the labor to deconstruct.
Well, that's what I was getting
Yeah.
at, not, right, not so much the model you gave, but would people who are DIY project enthusiasts or contractors utilize deconstructed materials, or is there an impediment to that because of concerns over, lack of standardization in product, any potential liability? What's that?
It just reminds me. Provisions.
Yeah, all the above. That's what I'm driving at. So, I mean, and I mean, not to be, Debbie Downer here, but we have a history nationally and certainly in the region of separating out potentially recyclable materials, only to find out we don't have a market for those materials. And so, that's sort of the chicken and egg issue, which is, before we start training people to deconstruct and before we start warehousing deconstructed materials, we ought to front load the demand side of it. So that's
Ithaca Reuse Center, which this is modeled off of, that they do deconstruction.
They do, that
And
is
so
their
they
primary.
the market there for it.
Yeah, they created the market.
Mhm.
They created kind of like a coalition of organizations like land banks that can use these materials. And they are making, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but more than $1 million every year in revenue based on this market. And maybe this is minor, but we did talk to Habitat Restore managers and store managers, and they said they don't throw anything that they receive. Everything is sold. So I think people are picking up these items and using them one way or the other.
And we spoke with one of the land banks and they too had a desire to learn more about deconstruction and kind of implement those practices when they're deconstructing homes. So there is kind of like a little bit of demand on both sides, I think.
You're in construction, Wayne. What do you think about deconstruction?
Not to be a Debbie Downer in my head, I think it's very impractical to time like that, given to take this down. Code issues that were brought up because of that. They really take a selective or a niche in order to want those reused products in their home or in their buildings, you know what I mean? So I think there'd be a very small demand for those products in new buildings. That's my opinion.
And maybe our target audience then shifts from larger developers to more, you're right, like the do-it-yourself or someone doing improvements on their homes and that kind of.
Or people from New York City want this, old growth lumber.
Right.
Well, that's true. I did a lot, I live in an old house. I did a lot of shopping at the historic Albany. But the organization of that at the time I was doing it made it very hard to come in and find what you were looking for.
Yeah, historical elements, I think there certainly is a market for that, and historical Albany has proven that.
Yeah,
I think as when you really get into the construction, but it's typically going in construction debris, which does not include metals, the demolition companies are having to recycle all that. That is where, some of our current laws and policies are not practical. In my opinion, I'd love to be proven wrong, right? There is an opportunity to train people and do a lot of stuff. Upcycling, I think, is part of the solution too, is that when you're looking at, whether it's furniture or vanities or something like that, reuse these materials for a non-structural, which is perfect. But that's, the reality is that 2x4s that were in the current building will never, unless something significantly changes, be able to be used again in new construction.
Because of code issues, yeah.
The side of the dimensional lumber is different. Back in the day, like
Okay.
2x4 was a 2x4.
Yeah.
Inch and a half, 3.5.
And then, I could think of it, and I know of a horror story like this, if there was a termite in someone's deconstructed home, and then that migrates, elsewhere, and then you have to have that rigorous level of testing, testing for lead-based paints.
then
Other-
you get into, is it?
Yeah, and again, I don't mean, I
Well, it's-
I appreciate the concept of reuse, but
But I'm not. 16, it's okay, but the young people, often they wait for the next version, although there's nothing more than a slight camera improvement, they want it. So I think there's a lot of education and change of the way we think about things, and that's where it's got to start, is we got to change thinking, I think.
One thing to stress too is there are great examples of other areas that have these reuse centers that are flourishing. They've gone through all the things we're talking about here. They need to look at code issues, to look at really what's going to resell. So this is obviously an important first step for the zero waste group. And in moving forward, there's a lot you can draw from. You're going to be looking at DC as a really successful operation. And I saw that they have a connection to affordable housing projects, for example. So they have kind of an award program where they kind of are able to selectively pick the nuggets of what can be reused and then apply that to, specific situations. So typically a benefit, hopefully someone's done a lot of this work that you can apply in this instance. You can't save it all necessarily, but you can apply kind of what's been learned elsewhere, either good things, avoid mistakes, and then, apply it to the work here. Ithaca Reuse as well, it remains as a consultant for this project, so they'll be also retained and able to apply their ongoing expertise to the project here.
Exactly.
I will say that the Reuse has been great. I'm relatively involved in this. They've helped with the presentations that Capital Reuse has done in the community. I think they've done 2 in Albany, 1 in Schenectady. I think there's going to be a 4th one that's virtually. So Ithaca Reuse and Capital Region Zero Waste have been pretty close partnership with this project, which you guys have been great with helping them out as well. So thank you.
So here's the technology that Patty
Okay,
put together.
If you scroll down, Mark, and click on so this is what, this is what the story map generally looks like. There's tabs at the top that'll jump you to our different sections. So I'm just going to briefly walk you through 2 sections. So if you want to click the high impact areas, it'll jump us to that. So this is a list of the criteria that we applied to get these high impact areas. We've also identified some medium impact areas or areas that don't.
What is I?
an area that will provide the greatest social, economic, and environmental benefit to our region. And we've done that by taking a look at these bits of criteria. So we want there obviously to be density. We want there to be a consumer base as well as a donor base. We also want this hypothetical reuse center to be regionally accessible. So we've put a buffer around our highly trafficked roadways to make sure that this area is connected. And then we've also, Lauren had briefly touched upon it, we want kind of to create these market clusters. Through our interviews and our research, we found that if there are more reuse centers within an area, it kind of boosts, it's good for both entities. So we've also applied that. So if we go here, and this is completely interactive, so if you click this, Mark,
Oh. This,
nope, down.
this.
You can just get a little bit closer here. There are 3 high impact areas or areas again that have satisfied all these criteria. And those are shaded in the gray here. We've also again identified a couple more medium impact areas that didn't fit all the criteria, but still would be a potentially great area for a reuse center. We have high impact area, 1 in Latham, 1 in Albany, and then 1 in Schenectady. So if you continue the scroll, we walk you through each of the high impact areas. You can click the button that says bus route layer. We've added additional bits of information that kind of paints the picture of this area. Again, we're really stressing the interconnectedness in our region here by showing our bus stops and also the route. This area is connected to various cities: Albany, Troy, Amsterdam, Saratoga Springs. This is great for people who are who may not have access to a car, who are looking to get affordable goods. Keep on scrolling. You can click on the transfer station layer, although kind of difficult to see, again, interactive, so you're able to zoom in and out. This is a transfer station right here. If someone is dropping off some goods that they're wanting to bring to a transfer station or a landfill, it might be nice to have a reuse center to kind of intercept that travel path. Maybe instead of going to transfer station, people might be inclined to bring it to a reuse center. This next one here takes a look at our brand name or recognizable brands of reuse or thrift stores. The darker points are our Goodwill, our Habitat for Humanity Restore, and our lighter gray dots are more of the antique stores, not as brand recognizable thrift locations. Again, we're kind of driving home that market cluster ideology. And then, so we can continue to scroll and it'll highlight the other impact areas, but for now we're just going to jump, Mark, if you can click the reuse toolbox. You can scroll down to the actual. So this allows the group and others who are interested in circular economy to create a more custom analysis. If you scroll down a little bit, near the bottom of the map, yeah, you can click this hamburger button here. Nope, one over. I guess it looks more like a sandwich. We can turn on and off different layers that we thought might be helpful. We looked at income levels. We looked at where our landfills are, where our transfer station we looked at some disadvantaged communities. So then the group or whoever's interested can kind of build their own analysis, whether they're using this for grants, they're just interested in data. They can utilize this tool. Another cool feature is if you click the hamburger button, if you're not familiar, the New York State Clearinghouse has a great list of data resources that are hosted on the cloud. So I've added this widget here so you can add your own data if you don't see something that you like in what I've provided. It also connects to the ArcGIS online repository of information that you can search through and add different information. This button here can also change the background, so we can take a look at satellite imagery. That group might find this useful if they're looking at size of parcels or if they're interested in looking more at the roadways. And another feature you can, at the top there's a search button. So again, if the group is talking to a real estate agent, they can go ahead and type that in at the top and take a look at the data that exists for that area. So we really built this to kind of not just give like maybe a snapshot in time, but make this kind of more evergreen and everlasting for the group or others who are just interested in learning more about the circular economy. And the data set we put together, Aaron had put together of reuse locations and thrift stores is also unique and original to CDRPC. So it just is another added kind of bonus that came out of this project. So we can get a really nice snapshot of the area.
And I'm an advisory member now of the group to kind of guide them throughout this. It's a lot of information for them to process, so I'm kind of there to remind them of the lessons learned from other groups and from our research. And they do actively use this tool every meeting, I think, for one reason or the other, whether it's a grant application or learning what kind of real estate they're looking for, they reference it. So
Great job,
Yeah,
ladies.
thank you.
And that's just an example of the creativity and skill that CDRPC can offer your community too, if you want to participate in the technical assistance program. Next up, as promised, we wanted to keep you updated on our regional climate action planning. We have started some stakeholder outreach related to that plan. We are just about to, I think, announce the revision to our regional greenhouse gas inventory. And Todd Fabozzi is here to give us an update. He sent me a link, rumor has it, to this presentation, so I'll bring it up. Todd?
They're doing.
The top one?
Who here wants to reuse anything from those bathrooms?
Yep. Oh, presenter mode.
Mark, can you send me this thing in the chest?
Sure. All right.
And just so everyone knows, I'm not gonna go through this whole presentation for you. This is a presentation we're making. And so I'll explain that. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the kind of thing we're doing. This is about an hour worth of presentation and discussion. So while I'll wait, Mark, I'm gonna probably have to take over your seat maybe or somewhere where I can get the there we go. All right, so thanks. So we've been working, and I think most of you know this, but I'll give you a quick just summary of the background in this. So this is $1 million grant from EPA to develop a climate action plan for the region. And we defined the region as the 8-county region that corresponds to our state programs where we provide technical support for these same kind of clean energy initiatives. And there's a great synergy between those programs, and really the whole value of this is to kind of create a wider container for the stuff we've been doing through NYSERDA and through DEC with support to local communities on clean energy actions and getting them grant funding. So the program started about 1.5 years ago, and we developed a preliminary climate action plan that was completed last March, about a year ago. And now we're in the phase of rounding that out and developing an updated greenhouse gas inventory. So the engagement with this has been ongoing through that whole 1.5 year process. So it started essentially with working with regional partners at the sector level, so that we have different sectors in which we look at where emissions come from, because the whole plan is a plan for reducing emissions. So I just noted this. I'll just show you quickly some of the slides that we show. This is the 8-county area. And so the gist of this is an older map from an emissions inventory that we did based on 2010 data under a previous grant. And we are in the process and have basically just recently completed an updated inventory, which is just a baseline that shows by each sector, by transportation, by buildings, by industry, by waste, by agriculture, how we, by power generation, how we produce emissions.
And then the charge of this is to develop a series of measures that can reduce those emissions with each sector. So if you, uh, our philosophical approach, if you will, was to not try to recreate the wheel, to try to work with groups in the region and become a container for what they're all doing. So, for example, with the transportation emissions, we worked with the Transportation Council and CDTA to begin with, and they helped us to develop the reduction measures. And then we did the same thing across each sector with sector-based experts and groups. And that was all done, a good chunk of it was done last year. And then into this year, we expanded it with a work group on agriculture and reaching out to certain industries and having discussions with industries as well. So we've kind of rounded that out. And now we're in the phase of taking the measures out to the municipalities to get their feedback. And so we've been holding county level meetings where we invite the municipalities to come from the counties as well. And we do a presentation, this presentation essentially. And then we have a homework assignment, if you will. We have a worksheet and we give them a chance to be able to add input to and feedback on our measures. So we've done several of those already. We've done them in Columbia County, we've done them in Warren County, we've done them in Schenectady County. We have one today at noon for Albany County, and then we have one next week. That's a broader one that's targeting municipalities in Rensselaer and Saratoga County, with some invites out to select communities, even in Washington and Greene counties, which we don't have a lot of activity in those areas. But when I get back to just talking about the philosophical ideas behind this, everything in what we're doing here is about creating a container for best practices for mitigation. There's nothing that we're saying in here that says anything about prohibitions, banning gas, any of the kind of things you hear elsewhere. Nothing about mandates or we have to do this or we have to do that. It's a purely voluntary set of possible actions, a menu of actions. So if you look at our updated inventory, this is just an example of where our emissions come from by sector. So you can see the large contribution to transportation. And we've broken some of these out in this particular diagram that we combine under buildings. So residential and commercial and industry are combined under buildings, and really buildings and transportation are our largest emitters. And when we compare the inventory we did in 2010 to the inventory we've just done using 2022 data, we can see that our emissions are actually down by around 12%. So we're seeing a pretty marked decrease in emissions. This is just some screenshots from our dashboard. So we took the updated inventory and then we put it into an accessible dashboard, and when you actually look at the live dashboard, you can move your mouse over the different pie segments and you'll get some of the smaller ones aren't visible here in this screenshot, but they'll be visible as you move your mouse around, and you can essentially look at and I suppose if I had my glasses on, I could actually see what the details of what this is in front of you. So this particular one is for the 8-county region, and it shows the emissions and it shows the source of those emissions. And you can do these this is an example of the 4 counties and their emissions, not greatly different, but the 4 counties are a little more urbanized than the 8 counties. So there's a higher level in the built environment in the 4 counties of emissions. So they're pull down menus, and you can select any of the communities or counties in the region, and you can get your own. This is one for the city of Albany, but you can go online and you can check out your own community. And this sets a great stage for us to be able to continue our work under the Climate Smart Community and Clean Energy Community programs with local communities and with our outreach team, with Tara, Josh, and Haley, who have been working with these communities for we've had a NYSERDA contract for 9 years now, doing this, bringing in millions of dollars in grants for projects, but helping them do clean energy actions that address these very kinds of things. And those programs are all voluntary as well, but we can then go, and this is our next phase. So this is what we're talking about with communities when we make this presentation. We now have this inventory and we have these measures. And first of all, we want your input on the measures, and we want you to check out the inventory that we have in our dashboard, but also at part of the worksheet that we have asked communities to check out and to download from our website, which I'll get to in a second, to indicate what they might be interested in working on. And then we can take it from the regional level down to now the county and municipal level, and then down to individual municipalities throughout the remainder of this year and in all through next year and onward, and work with those communities on these initiatives. They can just use the inventory for knowledge about their emissions. They can use it as part of a climate action plan. They can look at the measures and they can pick what ones they may want to work on, or they can actually do their own local climate action plan. So I just want to jump through here. This is, as part of the dashboard, we show a comparison of the previous inventory to the new inventory. So you can see where the decreases are in the built environment and transportation primarily. And, why is that? Well, there's a few things going on in New York. So in upstate New York, we have a reasonably clean grid compared to a lot of other parts of the country because we have hydro energy, nuclear energy, and mostly natural gas. And now more and more through the clean energy standard, more and more solar that is helping to clean the grid. And so we're doing larger solar installations that are making the grid itself cleaner. Just beneficial electrification in general, there's a transition that municipalities and that individuals are a part of, to buy electric vehicles and use electric vehicles, to use vehicles with better fuel economy, to be able to tap into solar for energy and more solar on the grid, to use heat pumps and instead of fossil fuel-based systems, particularly a transition out of fuel oil into heat pumps, which is a better financial deal for homeowners and businesses. And we're helping the municipalities to do that kind of thing.
Hey, Todd, does the transportation figures take into account or reflect, I should say, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the aftermath with the reduction or the increase in remote work, hence the reduction in commutation?
And those are all part of the inputs of some of that reduction, is some of that. But now we're starting to see it climb back to where it was before. So there was a period of reduction. And so, and we have a consultant who's put this together for us and is in the process now of doing a more analytical evaluation of the change and the inputs, which we'll have as a write-up in our plan. So our plan, the full plan, is going to be due September 1st. And that's our target and then we're going to continue on this grant working with municipalities. So I'll go through these other ones quickly. So as I noted, and this isn't for you to try to read it all. This is what we're showing people in an hour-long presentation and what we'll show Albany County today. We talk about what the purpose of this plan is, types of climate action plans. So this is a regional scale plan, and our mitigation measures are meant to be broad enough to be a container for local actions. We're not trying to tease out every little detail, but to have broad enough container for local actions. There are government operations plans, and we've worked with communities on a number of those. Those are the plans in which we do a local GHG inventory of what the government controls, government-owned buildings, government fleets, and then come up with ways to reduce the emissions by municipalities. So we've been working with communities on those, and then community scale plans, which is what we will be working with local communities on if any of them are interested. And now they're kind of set up to do this, because you can look at all our measures and our inventory, and they're halfway there by this work. Just going to pop through some of these quickly. So we've then put the sectors that we have. So there's 13 measures in transportation, and these are the measures. You're not going to be able to read all these now. And I'm going to go quick because I know we're far along. We've done the same thing with the built environment and the measures, and then waste and the waste measures for reduction, and industry and the industry measures for reduction, and the same thing with agriculture, and the same thing with land sequestration, which is something we're going to tease out even more next year when you look at not the specific things more from a technology standpoint that you can do to reduce emissions, but more from a land preservation point of view of ways that you can simultaneously protect ag. You can there's beneficial aspects to just not developing certain areas and the carbon absorption of just the natural environment, and particularly larger trees. We have some measures for land sequestration itself. So this is just a kind of snapshot from it's not the whole spreadsheet, but we have the measures in tabs in a spreadsheet downloadable from our website, in which we've added columns in which we allow communities to comment on these. And what we're asking is for communities to do this together. So we're kind of giving a homework assignment. Like today, when we do the Albany County communities, we're gonna point them to this spreadsheet on our website, ask them to download it, and then as a community, discuss it and get it back to us within 45 days. We work with a lot of sustainability committees at the local level who will meet monthly. So that'll give them another month to review it, discuss it together. They put their name on it, what community it comes from, and any comments that they have. They might not have many comments, but at least, and they can become part of what we're calling the Capital Region Climate Action Collaborative. So on our website, that's kind of how we branded this whole thing, is that the communities that have participated up to now, we've had a municipal work group driving this, plus the regional sector groups. But then any municipality that contributes can become part of this collaborative. They indicate there's a column for what they might be interested in working on, which we'll follow up with them after the plan is done, or even right away to start working with them with our local outreach team, and add any measures that we might have missed. And so this is just pointing, this is a snapshot from the website and where we've got the spreadsheet to download and how to become part of the collaborative by reviewing that, and then basically just leaving it off with follow up with our local outreach team to help them at the local level. So that's kind of the broad gist of it. So we're going to put this together into a report due September 1st, but we're also going to, and you saw a sample of Maddie's talents with the story maps. Well, we're going to tap into those talents. Also, I'll thank you, Maddie, for the talents in doing the dashboard and presenting complicated data in a visible way and an accessible way. But we're also going to be developing a broad story map, and it's going to be about all of the kinds of things we've been doing as a region and the communities have been doing regarding clean energy initiatives. And so that we'll be able to integrate the programs we have from DEC, the Climate Smart Community Outreach Program, which we, by the way, we're starting that now. We got our final contract in for April. So now we're back on that project, which is a $2.16 million project for 3 years. And it's a territory wide, and we've got NYSERDA contracts. So we want to, part of the plan is vignettes of what communities have done with clean energy projects. We're putting those together. That'll be in the plan, but also be in the story map as well. So that's the broad gist of everything.
Quick
I just
question,
wanna-
if I could. So the clean energy and the emissions on transportation and all that, and what we're trying to move towards. Is there any consideration or any data showing the abundance of lithium batteries that we put in buses, in school buses? They don't last forever. We have no way of exposing them to massive amounts of chemicals, and the cost of those chemicals to put out those fires that can burn for months on end. There's a lot of questions I have with the way we're moving, and we say it's all good for our environment, but those rare earth mineral mines across the world are massive. The machinery we need to pull that out of the ground isn't clean. You can't use batteries to pull the stuff out of the ground, right? So is there any data showing the impact of all that to our local landfills, or where it's going? Then the solar panels is an issue with older solar panels. They only last for so long, and then they got to be replaced.
I will
What are
say
we doing with all that?
that Todd's approach stands in contrast to the state's approach under the CLCPA, where they established these targets and guidelines that were unrealistic. They didn't engage the industry sectors.
Mhm.
They didn't talk to the people who were doing this work. They didn't establish realistic metrics. They didn't understand what the industries were already doing.
And they
to
didn't
lower their
listen.
carbon footprint. I don't know about comparing and contrasting the rare earth metal carbon footprint versus the carbon savings of an electric vehicle versus lithium. But I do know that we took a much more realistic approach. We're not telling the school districts to adopt, electric buses. We're on a completely voluntary program. But I don't, you guys are in the sector. Is there data?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as localized data, no, when you raise points, and I think that those points can probably be raised in a lot of different ways. The same thing about coal, for example, which there's federal initiatives to reduce that or to restart coal. If you have looked at coal mines, or lots of things that we use, metals that we use, copper in your water, and go to a copper mine, or there's always going to be some kind of impact, I suppose, on any technology, whether it's clean energy or not. And I guess I have version 6. There's lithium in this too, and you probably got it in your pocket, you know. But the point is that that I'm making as a response is I think, you know, what we hope to see is an ongoing transformation of technology, not a forced transformation, but just knowledge that continually looks for new ways to do things and cleaner ways to do things, and not forcing people to change, but to people make their own choices. So using the phone as an example, I always says, you know, nobody had to mandate that we use a smartphone. Just decided to do it when it was good. And I think the same thing will happen with electric vehicles. The same thing will happen with heat pumps. I'm really skeptical of the idea of forcing this on people, but I also think that technology evolves. I mean, if we can come up with a battery, for example, that doesn't rely on rare earth metals, and they're doing research on, say, sodium batteries, if something happens like that, then that's a game changer. So, you know, I think that, but you're right, but we can probably go through lots of different things. One of the things that's been talked about, and this also has a lot of byproducts, but I think it's something worth thinking about, is nuclear. And the state has started to think more about small scale nuclear plants. It's clean energy, but yeah, you got a waste product and you've got to mine that stuff. And so I guess, you know, with every advanced technology and industrialization, we've had what the businesses will call negative externalities, and where do they go and who pays for them?
What your point's well taken.
Yeah.
In terms of the mining, I'm not arguing against mining. I mean, my town, we have mines all through my town.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is I always feel like there's never an alternate argument or data showing the effects of all of that compared to what we're trying to.
Yeah.
But I
you're
think
right.
there is, if you look for it, and I think what we see is the reaction of people, just the population in general, that pushes back on things that they perceive as being beneficial. So it isn't just a government kind of thing. It's a lot more than that. So I think, you know, we keep changing as we move along, but you gotta move along.
It's a great work product. From a, you know, standpoint of a board member, I'd be interested to see like how we're taking this, Mark and Todd, and putting together, for want of a better term, the road show, just how we market the resources of the planning commission and put that out. So,
Well, what's the,
yeah,
so that would be to just share that, you know, that, and then there are other touch points, obviously, that can go through the process. The last one being September. So I think, you know, Todd's meeting with stakeholders, but we are looking at the component of that as more public facing side.
yeah. Like Gary, you're town supervisor, right? Joe.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. Gary's over here, Joe.
All right, no worries. Senior moment. Well, you're a town supervisor. You foresee like supervisors having a public meeting for a presentation of the climate action plan, just not just to the town board, but you know.
Yeah, educational to the public,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that type of thing.
Yeah. But the thing you might not see, right, is like a lot of what we've been doing is inside baseball, we call it that. So we're working in the capital region right now with about 70 communities that we've been working with, some of them for almost 10 years on these very things. So this is not new to the communities that are interested in clean energy. This is nothing new. This is just our way of creating a wider container. There'll probably be very few new communities that join in because they saw this, that aren't already in, and they're doing their own things. And these guys have meetings daily, weekly, monthly, right now, with a series of communities who are already working on these actions. So this is just taking the climate smart work they're doing, the clean energy work they're doing, and putting it in a broader container and making it easier for them to continue doing this stuff. But there's very little new news, in my view, to the municipalities. Now, then there's different philosophies about what's public facing. And so, for example, I've always thought of us as working with municipal governments, not working directly with the residents, or going around the municipal government to work with the residents, and let the municipal governments work with their residents. And so that's where it trickles down, so that if we start working with a community who says, we want to do a climate action plan, now it's on the municipal government. We're helping them to then reach out to their communities or to their residents, to engage in the discussions that they want to have at the local level.
So do you see local governments reaching out like that?
They're absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've been doing that continuously. So this gives more information and makes it easier for the communities, because we've created a menu of best practices and we have the data for the inventory. But we've shown some of this other stuff. We've had millions of dollars in grant funding for implementation projects over the course of the last few years from the local communities that these guys have worked with, and that communities have supported these kind of things. So they're already well underway. But the other, I guess it's a philosophical thing, is, there's a lot of negative and misrepresentation on all sides of things about this stuff. And this stuff has become demonized for political reasons and misrepresented, in my view, too. I mean, I never heard of a technology or a fuel source being woke, for example. I mean, I don't think natural gas was woke when it displaced coal, but somehow that's how this stuff is being portrayed. So I'm really cautious about, I don't want to be part of those conversations and try to stir up a hornet's nest of people. We want to just work with the communities to help them and the ones that want help, and not try to push this on anybody. So that's just maybe just an approach that tries to stay a little bit under the radar of trying to stir up hornet's nests that aren't going to help anybody. But it's not to hide what we're doing. We're working with tons of communities right now, but so I don't know. That's just
There's leaders and followers, and then you're working with some of the leaders, and
Mhm.
a lot of the things they do aren't political at all. They're saving their community energy and whatnot. Never mind the measurements. It's costing less, and people react, it costs less.
Right. But I will admit that when you look at some of the mandates in New York, you can become skeptical of the benefit of mandates and prohibitions when the rest of the country might not be participating, or the rest of the world might not be participating. Then what are we doing? Are we increasing costs for New Yorkers? But that's something different from what we've consciously been able to articulate in this particular grant. It's not to go down that route.
On a positive note, the data that you have accumulated is fantastic. I mean, I
Organized, that's the key. You can have data, but you guys have organized it very well.
They're packaging it,
Mhm.
and I put it out to our town and in the community, and they actually started to take some of that data, and you used it going back to the town, saying, look, are you really thinking this thing through? Because the data, and I really thank you very much. Because I sit there and just look at this data over and over and over. And each quarter I come back and go, wow, you're doing a hell of a job. Thank you. Oh, and Wayne, you brought up an excellent point. I don't think he was trying to establish a negative question. I think he was saying, is the data showing everything? I mean, it's a huge concern. Battery plants, how are they gonna affect our towns? Solar panels out in California is a huge problem that they're not talking about, because it is a problem. He wasn't thinking of it as a hurdle, but has that but then applied also.
No, I agree. And I think that this is this community, when we talk about the circular economy,
Yeah.
this is what this is and how many different things have we really thought about through the whole life cycle of what they are. And so I think they're absolutely valid points, but I think if we started to deconstruct a whole bunch of other aspects of laptops, take your pick, your own vehicle, the tires, and where do they go, and all other kinds of things you can find. Wow, we got a whole trail of dealt with,
Recycling is so profitable.
Profitable, and we have the economy that supports it, so it just, yeah, so we're always chasing our tail, we'll never get a complete answer, and I think here, it's really beneficial when people are not afraid to ask the questions or state an opinion. We need to do that, that's what airs these things out.
well, I got into an argument with somebody because of electric bikes, because they were all for it and tried to convince me that was the way we should go. And I've been a biker my whole life. And I was like, why do we have to take a bike now and add a battery and add all this other crapola to it that costs, that's going to be waste and all these same points and say, can't, we have wasteful ways of doing things. We have walking. I mean, I've spent half my career at CDRPC advocating for walkable communities.
Thanks, Dr. King. Great work. And
Yeah.
give you the progress at our next meeting. Our next meeting is that will likely be back to the detention facility. Oh, good.
So, all right, so do we have a motion to adjourn, and do we have enough people here for a quorum?
Yeah.
Anyway, we had a motion. Gary, did you motion that? We have a second. Everybody say aye. Nobody's. Great meeting, though, very informational. I think, I don't think it was a waste of my time.
What's that? That's for this one. Huh?
Right, we'll still be in
Oh,
it.
yeah, I mean, they have a written one.
I want everybody to keep their own minutes. A little beyond your desired limitations, but I think it was worth it.
Yep.
I think everybody kind of dictated. I will read all the reviews. I will go back and look more. Interesting.
I signed up for the.
Yeah. It was.
Thank you. I will never drive the Florida again. I did it once. One too many times. You know what?
I was almost gonna leave without a coat. It is April. I've gone out. I've got a